Hey everybody, welcome to Showit Live here on showit.com. I'm Field, and this is our amazing guest, Nathan Holritz. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks for having me.
Good. Showit Live is a weekly webcast where we highlight different creatives in the industry who have something awesome to share. Like Nathan today is sharing some Lightroom workflow secrets with us. So welcome to Showit Live.
Thank you. It's cool to be here.
It's a pretty neat experience.
It is.
I enjoy it every
and
week.
I get to hang out with you. So
it's the downside. You have to hang out with me in order to get to do this. Well, we have some really fun things in store for you guys today. But before we get too far into the Lightroom workflow, we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple exciting things we have coming up. So there's this event called WPPI, which is happening in early March. Late February, it's early March. But at WPPI, we are going to have our third annual Showit dinner, which is at the Wicked Spoon there at the Cosmopolitan area, I don't know, mall-ish type thing. Okay. It's amazing food. It's really cool people. And we actually have tickets on sale for the Showit dinner. Last year it sold out. We had over 120 people there. It was a really exciting time. But you can actually find ticket information for that in the Showit group, and we'll make sure we post that up again. And hopefully here in the chat we'll have a little link for you to go view. But really awesome food. We're selling out of tickets pretty quick, so if you don't have one, go in there and get it. It's gonna be a
good
blast.
Food and cool people. I don't know if you can get much better.
Pretty much,
than that.
And it's a buffet.
Oh, even
yeah.
better.
Okay. And when you say buffet, it's like buffet.
Right.
This is the nicest buffet.
This isn't like Golden Corral.
No, nothing wrong with Golden Corral, maybe. But this is amazing. This is like really good food. In addition to that, it's wintertime. Yeah, we may have like trees and tiny Santas hidden about. But one of the great things about winter is people take this time to redo their websites. Okay. And longtime awesome Canadian Showtier Justine Russo actually just did hers in 2 days. And she used one of our favorite features here at Showit. It's called Snowit. And so if you go to justine-russo.com, you'll actually see the snow falling on her site. And she just did this beautiful new site.
I'm impressed.
It's pretty sweet. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and so you can find out more about Justine. Her About section right here is one of my favorite things. Just going through and reading the little quirky things about her and the things that she loves. She's a really cool human. She's really tall. And she gives good hugs.
Okay.
That's like my knowledge on Justine.
Okay.
She's pretty great. And then in addition to that, one of the things we love to do here at Showit is we love to highlight and feature some of our employees around here. And this week is a really special one because is she an employee? Isn't she an employee? Yes, she is one of the quintessential parts of Showit. She is the wife to Showit CEO Todd Watson, Elisa Watson. And so we have this awesome article here on showit.com. So you can head over there after the show and you can read all about this amazing person. She's a really cool person. She's a super awesome mom. And she's like unbelievably knowledgeable in all things literature. So definitely go check out
the secret weapon behind everything that happens in Showit. Huh?
Yeah, she's one of the smartest people around here. I mean, she trumps me. Like there's like 8 or 9 steps between me and her in intelligence. She's really cool. So definitely go check out that article about her.
Cool.
Really
That's
neat.
awesome.
Yeah. And then one other thing before we get started, there's this little thing called Showit 5 coming out. So it's not little. Just a little. It's not little. Yeah. It's a really big, exciting thing. So here at Showit, we've been working really hard on what's next with Showit, and one of the really big things is Showit 5. So Showit 5 is going to be our new web design platform for creatives. It's basically like having the greatest tool in the world to be creative as an adult. You know, as a kid, you're creative. You do all sorts of stuff. You draw the really weird pictures of like you and your siblings on one side and then tons of white space and then mom and dad over here. Yeah. This is that type of creativity for kids. Or for adults. You can do anything and everything. It's going to be really exciting. To find out more about Showit 5, go to showit5.com, enter in your email, RSVP to get in the know, and then you'll start receiving emails like how to apply to get early access to Showit 5, which is a really cool one. You'll also get a digital magazine and a blogging guide, all sorts of great stuff just for putting in your email.
I'm stoked to see it all come out.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I've got a little behind the scenes peek too, and it's pretty exciting, guys. Definitely sign up. Make sure you find out all the latest.
There's some really cool things coming. Yeah. So Nathan, you are the owner of Photographer's Edit. You're a pretty rad photographer yourself. Not gonna lie. Like no, you're pretty rad. But you own Photographer's Edit, which is a great editing company that allows photographers to get a little bit more of their free time back. They actually get free time because you're able to outsource some of your editing, and you guys are very personal with it. You stick with everybody's styles. You make it look just like theirs, and you give them free time. So you run a really cool company. So I wonder, like, why would you be sharing some of the Lightroom workflow secrets with the rest of us?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. Photographer's Edit does offer custom post-production for wedding and portrait photographers, but ultimately what we're truly about, our mission is to give photographers their lives back. Give them, actually, as one photographer even told me, give him his wife back.
Oh, sure.
but yeah, certainly what we're ultimately doing is giving photographers time back. And a lot of photographers are spending as much as 12, 16, 20 hours, even more per wedding, for example, processing their own images. So if we can process even one of those sessions or one of those events for them, the amount of time that we're saving them is absolutely incredible. But if we don't have the privilege to process their images for them, the least that I can do in light of our mission to save photographers time is to teach them how to use this incredible tool, Lightroom, efficiently. Yeah. And so that's what I'm spending time doing.
Yeah. So, and then what's obviously you talked about kind of the purpose behind Photographer's Edit, but also specifically the workflow you're talking about, efficiency. So if somebody's out there and they're not quite at the part of their business where they're able to outsource their editing, what is the efficiency by them? Like, why is this so important? Not just to Photographer's Edit, but why is it important to you?
Well, I did photograph weddings for about 10 or 11 years, and I have 2 kids myself. So the idea of being able to get out from behind the computer and actually have time with my kids was and still is extremely important. So it made sense to create a company that would ultimately give me more free time with my kids, and then that would also give other photographers free time with their family, their loved ones, or maybe to pursue a particular passion. And ultimately, I mean, we are business owners to do things that actually will help them build their business.
For sure.
But I think it's really important that there is, when we start to look into the possibility of creating, for example, a new Lightroom workflow, it can get maybe a bit tedious at times, a bit monotonous at times. If we have that motivational factor that drives what we're doing and trying to make this change in workflow, then that makes a big difference. So I would suggest that asking that question, why does it matter that I save time, will help drive or make change in workflow a lot easier, whether it's changing how you process your own images or ultimately considering the possibility of outsourcing post-production to a different company.
Yeah. Awesome. So, and also a lot of guys have already found the awesome little chat window here to my left, your right side of Nathan. Log in. I see you guys letting us know where you're coming from, which is awesome. But also, if you have any questions during the show about Lightroom or about Lightroom workflow, like, this is a great opportunity to learn from like a super awesome guru. So feel free to ask the questions, and we'll do our best to get to each and every one of them throughout the show.
For sure.
So, and even before we get into Lightroom, something that I know has come up a lot and something that I used to struggle with and probably have something to still learn on it, file management becomes a big portion of the pre-Lightroom, like pre-workflow. Yeah. Would you mind touching a minute on file management and just kind of your process there?
Well, the reality, and one of the things that I've seen and certainly been guilty of at times is, if you look at the average photographer's desktop, their computer desktop, what do you see? You see folders and files kind of strewn all over the place, right? So what we want to do is create an efficient way of managing the files and folders to begin with. And then it's a lot easier to pull those images into Lightroom. You don't have to spend all kinds of time searching for those files and folders on your computer or external hard drives if you've got a really simple, efficient way to manage those files and folders up front. So it's a bit geeky, if you will, that when we're talking about workflow stuff like this, but the reality is if you put just a little bit of time in up front on this type of workflow, then ultimately you're going to save time down the road.
Yeah. Well, these are the little things that creatives cringe at, right? It's like, it's like, oh, organization. Yeah,
and it's actually a great point. So what you have to keep in mind is that creativity and structure aren't mutually exclusive. You put a little bit of structure in place, and ultimately what that does is give you freedom, the time to then focus on the creative side, right? So they don't have to be mutually exclusive. It may take a little bit of time investment up front, again, and putting the systems in place that give you that efficiency, but then that means free time on the back end to be able to focus on the creative side. So
perfect.
So yeah, just to touch on that very briefly, I think one of the things that photographers do is they tend to keep the files that they're going to be working on their desktop. And as much as some photographers shoot, 20, 30, 40 weddings a year, or maybe 50 or 60 portrait sessions a year, it's easy for that hard drive to start to fill up, especially when you're shooting in RAW. So my suggestion would be, first of all, to house all of the working jobs, all of the events, the portrait sessions that photographers are working with actively with their clients. They keep those on an external hard drive.
All right.
When they actually go to work on the files, it's more efficient to move the files to the computer, to the desktop, to work with them. Lightroom will access those files a little bit more efficiently. They'll be able to work more quickly. But for the most part, keeping those files and folders on an external hard drive allows you to keep the hard drive, your working hard drive, clean and working, again, more efficiently. And I think that's really important. So that's a good starting place. Get a good external hard drive. I'm not sponsored by any hard drive companies or anything, but
I should be.
Yeah, seriously.
Let's get on that.
But Western Digital is a hard drive that as a company that I've used for years and years. They work really well. It's so inexpensive now to get a 500 gigabyte or a terabyte or even a couple of terabyte hard drive and use that as your working external hard drive. My suggestion would be to get a second, whatever you buy a second one of those and use that as an external hard drive or as an offsite backup, external backup. So you're going to have your on-site external working hard drive, if you will. And then you'll have a secondary hard drive that you use as an offsite backup. And I went to the extreme back when I was shooting. I actually had external hard drives in a bank vault.
Oh, sure.
I'm not recommending that you guys do that necessarily. Find a friend's house or a family member's house that you can take them to. But if something were to happen at your home, your stuff gets stolen, house catches on fire, whatever the case, or in your studio, then you've got an offsite backup. In addition to whatever online galleries you might be using is a tertiary backup. Maybe a little bit tedious, but putting those systems in place, I think, is important when we're talking about working with digital files. So starting with an external hard drive is important, and I don't know if you guys can see my desktop there, but
pull it up right here.
We're gonna treat this folder that you see in the top right hand corner as an external hard drive. We'll imagine that's what that is, and then what we're going to do is create just a very, very simple file tree or folder tree, if you will. We're going to start with the year. So we've got the current year, 2015. And then within that folder, you're going to have, in this case, we'll call them the Smiths. You're going to have a folder that is the client's last name and then the type of session or event that you were photographing to kind of differentiate them. Now, I'm just going to add this as a side note. I think it's important to remember that complexity and workflow doesn't make you a better business person. It doesn't make you a better photographer. Simplicity will allow you to get the job done more quickly. Some of you may have been to what they call digital asset management workshops. It sounds complicated, even in and of itself, right?
But it sounds, once again, to creatives, it sounds sexy.
It does.
Digital asset management.
And people are making money teaching this stuff, probably.
Sure.
But the reality is what we need is to have is just very simple organizational system where you can easily search for those files and folders, get to them, get the job done, and move on to more important things. So what I'm sharing with you both in this organizational system, as well as the workflow piece of it that we're going to talk about in a second, it's about simplicity. It's not about finding the most complicated way to go about things. It doesn't make you a better photographer and business owner to have a complicated workflow. We want to get this stuff done because really this is the reactive work, right? It's not the stuff that's going to build the business. So we need to get done quickly. So very simple: external hard drive, the year, the client's last name, and then the type of session, the event or portrait session. And then within that, we're going to have 3 folders. We're going to have the originals, whether you're shooting in JPEG or RAW. And then the 2 additional folders, which we'll create here when we get into the workflow, are going to be, well, the other folder is going to be called edited. And then the 3rd folder will be the Lightroom catalog folder. And we'll talk about Lightroom catalogs here in just a second. But that's it. It's really, really simple.
Yeah.
We don't need anything complicated. And in this case, it's very easily searchable because you're thinking logically. You're thinking about the client's last name. You're thinking about the type of session that was photographed. If for some reason you have clients that have the same last name, or maybe you photograph for that client multiple times in the year, you could create additional separation by adding a date to that folder name. Very, very easy. But these are very easily searchable.
I've never met a Smith family, so we're probably safe.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. But that's the organizational structure that we're talking about. And again, with that secondary drive, you could simply mirror it, or you could just back up the JPEGs to that offsite backup. But this is the simple system that I recommend.
Awesome. So let's get into the Lightroom workflow. And you actually came to us with 4 pretty solid steps for Lightroom workflow. So,
and again, it's about simplicity, right?
Yeah.
So there are hundreds, probably even thousands of features in Lightroom that we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about. But the key here is focusing on the basic steps that will allow us to get in, get the images processed, and get on to more important things.
Awesome.
So that's what we're going to do. So we'll go ahead and process these images from the Smiths, if you will. And today we'll probably just process a few of them for the sake of the demonstration. But I'm just going to drag and drop that folder of raw files to Lightroom. Now I'm working in Lightroom version 6 or Creative Cloud. If you guys aren't using Creative Cloud yet, it's the best $10 a month that you're going to spend. You have the latest version of Lightroom, the latest version of Photoshop. So just do a quick Google search, Lightroom Creative Cloud, and you'll be able to find that and get up to date with the latest version of the software. If you're on version 5, what we're going to share here, still absolutely relevant. So good to go. What we're going to do at this point is create an individual catalog. And there are different thought processes and approaches to this. For the sake of, again, simplicity, I recommend that photographers create a new catalog for each job that they photograph. It makes for easy transfer of files back and forth. If you do ever send your images to a post-production company like Photographer's Edit, or maybe you have an in-house editor that you're sharing the files with, or you may want to take the files on the road with you. It's very easy to move an individual catalog from an individual job from place to place. And you run minimal risk of Lightroom getting finicky when it comes to connecting the images to the catalog. So I recommend creating a new catalog. We're going to go ahead and do that. We'll just call this Smith Lightroom catalog. And we're just going to create that. And you'll see later in the folder structure, it's actually created it there, but it's going to open up Lightroom with this fresh catalog. And we've got about 80 or so images here that we're going to import. But this is the first step, is the import process. You might think, well, yeah, that's a given. Why is that an actual individual step? But more specifically, we're talking about an import process with a developed preset. And this is going to save you a lot of time. If you actually take Lightroom presets are all the rage, right? People particularly like the film style Lightroom presets.
Some people sell them. Can you believe that?
Can you believe it? And making lots of money doing so.
Right.
But the interesting thing about those presets is that they aren't necessarily geared towards saving you time. They're more geared toward creating a particular look, which is fine. My recommendation, though, for the sake of efficiency, if you're creating an efficient Lightroom workflow and you're processing those images yourself, is to create a Lightroom preset that will give your images a great head start. In fact, if you photograph the image well, that image is going to be ready to export to JPEG when you're done. So the preset that I've created here is the preset that we use in production at Photographer's Edit. And it's a very simple preset in the sense that it's not applying a lot of settings, but I've spent hours developing it because it works well, or in order for it to work well across a wide variety of lighting scenarios, indoor, outdoor, different camera types, etc. So this preset, when applied, if I photograph the image well to begin with, it is going to give that image an extra pop. And that image is going to be ready to export to JPEG when I'm done.
Awesome.
That simple. So we're going to go ahead and choose that particular preset right here in the develop settings panel over on the right hand side. It says develop settings. I'm just going to choose that option. and go to my color preset and choose that. For the sake of simplicity, again, today, I'm not going to be talking a whole lot about metadata, keywords. These are important factors if you do want to make sure that you're applying that copyright data to your images.
Yep.
And if you do want to be able to search through thousands of images later on, especially if you keep multiple jobs in one catalog. But we're just talking about an individual order and an individual catalog here, so I'm not worried about that. The key factor here, and believe it or not, saves an incredible amount of time, is importing with that developed preset. And the cool thing about that, one of the reasons that saves time, in addition to kind of giving my images the enhancement that it does, is that I'm not worried about applying presets later on, right? The typical photographer's workflow, if you will, is a bit more haphazard in nature. They bring the images in and then they make an adjustment here and they delete that image and apply a preset here, and it's just a bit haphazard in nature. What we're talking about is an efficient system that makes sense. It flows nicely. And by applying the image, this preset on the images and import, we've done a bunch of work for ourselves already from the get-go. And it's automating it, so it's really simple to do. So I'm going to click import, and that's the first step. It's the import with the developed preset. And again, it may seem very simple. We're not talking about anything earth-shattering here, but believe it or not, just that one step is probably going to save these photographers an incredible amount of time because they've thought about the preset that they're applying up front. That a preset is designed so that it enhances the images across a wide variety of scenarios very well, effectively. And then they can get to the next step 2, which is the culling. The culling process. And for those who are converting to black and white, the conversion to black and white. So it's kind of a 2-part second step, if you will. And we'll get into that. So a lot of photographers, I think, spend an incredible amount of time culling their images because they are thinking about what images they need to delete.
Sure.
And there's this kind of a psychological block in that process of, oh man, I'm going to delete my work, my artwork, right? So I think a more efficient way to go about the process is actually to choose which images you want to keep.
For sure.
Versus thinking about the images that you want to delete. And of course, we're working in Lightroom, so this is all happening virtually. We're not actually deleting anything, but we're going to focus on the images that we want to keep versus images that we wanted to delete. And more specifically, we want to focus on picking just 1 or 2 from a series. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and pull these images up. And by the way, we're going to use keyboard shortcuts to help make things even more efficient. Probably about 85 to 90% of my workflow is using keyboard shortcuts. I'm not going to touch that trackpad or the mouse. So I'm going to hold down Shift, just move over with the arrow key and multi-select the images. And then I click on the letter N. N is in Nathan. Don't ask me why they named why the keyboard shortcut is an N, but I pull.
But it's as in Nathan. I think that
works, right?
Key. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm pulling up the 4 images, and from this series of images, I'm simply going to look for the image that stands out to me. Okay. As opposed to analyzing every tiny little detail, I'm going to look at this series of images. I look at one. I say that looks really great. I'm going to choose that image, and I'm going to mark it with the P key. So the P key will flag the image, and you can kind of see. In the bottom left-hand corner there, it's a bit small, but there's a flag associated with that particular image now. And that suggests the fact that we have picked that image as a keeper image, an image that we're going to later process and give to a client. And that's it. Pick that image. Now, I will go ahead and add the caveat here. If you are converting some of your images to black and white, what you're going to do is pick an image, and then in addition, give it in this case, a 5-star rating. Now, it doesn't have to be a 5-star rating. It could be anything from a 1 to a 5-star or even a colored flag. Whatever is easiest for you. I personally am putting my index finger on the P key to pick the images, and then my little pinky key on the number 5 key.
Reaches the 5.
Yeah, and it's very simple. I can work that way very quickly. So I'm going to also flag an image that I convert to black and white, but then I'm going to give it a 5-star rating to convert to black and white.
So that way you can actually later on search or basically filter out by 5-star rating.
You got it. You're already catching on. You could probably even teach this workflow. It's that simple. I don't. That's it. I'm later going to filter for those images and we'll convert to black and white. And I'll show you that process here in a second. But I'm going to jump back to the grid view, and we're back to this is the library module, by the way, but also the grid view. Click on the letter G for grid, and it gets us back to this view. And then I'm going to jump to the next set of images. So I'm going to pull up the next series, 3 or 4 images, click on the letter N. And by the way, the reason I'm doing this, I'm not working on a large screen here. You guys saw it's a little 13-inch laptop. I don't necessarily recommend laptops for the best color quality, but if you're doing some quick work, on a small laptop, it's a bit difficult to see small thumbnails. So back to the survey view, the letter N brings it up. I can pick the image that I like and jump on to the next series. And so we continue to repeat this process over and over again, moving through this process of culling. I would say for an 85 image, or actually let's jump to probably the average, maybe 300 image portrait session. If you're going through this process, picking a series or pulling up a series, picking an image, and then moving on to the next set, repeat that process over and over again, you should easily be able to cull a portrait session within 10, 15 minutes, if that.
Yeah. Well, and this is additive culling, right? Isn't that I don't know if that's a real term.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah. So we're taking out the images, we are essentially ignoring the images, really, that we don't want to look at or to process. We're not getting to the processing yet. And again, it's important that we keep these steps separate, because at this point, again, a lot of photographers might be, okay, that's really nice. Oh, let me jump to the develop module and I'm going to make a little adjustment here and there. Yeah. That's where we start to waste time. We need to group the tasks together that make sense together, that flow well together. But yeah, in that case, we are kind of editing out the images. That term edit is used in so many different ways when it comes to post-production. So I use the word culling, and that very simply defined is to remove something, right? So we are ultimately getting rid of the images that we don't want to keep, but we're focusing on the images we do want to process.
And that way, just mentally too, it's a much happier experience. Instead of it's like, oh, I'm getting her, look at this image, oh, her eyes kind of closed, blah, blah, blah. It's, oh no, this one's perfect. And like mentally, when you're going through, you just feel better about who you are as a photographer when you do that. No joke. It's true.
It's true. Yeah, you're like, oh, that looks incredible. I'm going to pick that one. All right, let's jump to the next set.
Instead of removing the ones you don't like, these are my favorite.
Exactly.
Boom.
Positive focus, right?
Yeah, indeed.
I love it. So that's the second step. So that first step is the import with the develop preset. And if you guys have questions about how to create these presets, don't hesitate to ask. But the key is, again, to create a preset, not necessarily those that you would buy pre-made, because they don't, those style of presets don't work well across a variety of scenarios. There's still adjustments that have to be made. Create a preset that works well across a wide variety of scenarios. That's the preset we're applying in import. So now we no longer have to do anything more with presets during the processing. We then cull. We choose the images that we want to later process. And I mentioned showing you how to filter for those black and white images. So once I'm done culling, I'm going to go ahead and activate the filter bar up here. It's Command L, or if you're on a Windows computer, Control L. And it activates this little filter bar up here at the top.
I have never seen that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And then you just click on the flag. So we're filtering for the images that we want to keep, right? And then in addition, I'm going to go ahead and run a 5-star filter for the images that we're going to convert to black and white. So if you don't convert images to black and white, you can ignore this part. But for those of you who do, I'm just going to go ahead and select these images and grab this little paint can, spray paint can down here at the bottom. I'm going to click on that, the little painter, and I can actually choose the preset that I want to apply to these images. So I choose that preset, click on either one of these images, because we've selected Command A, we've selected all of the images already, and just click on it. It applies that preset there. These images we're not done processing them. We're going to get to the processing next, but we've applied that black and white preset there. I'm going to go ahead and put that back, and we'll undo that 5-star filter. Just click on the 5-star again. And now we're looking at the images that we want to process and give to the client. So that's the third step. We're going to jump from the culling and conversion of black and white now to the third step, which is the actual processing. At this point, we're going to jump into the develop module. And I would recommend going ahead and showing this little, we can use the keyboard shortcut, that's Shift Tab. That gets rid of all the panels. We can click that again, and now we see all the panels, including this little film strip here at the bottom. And that's important for those series of images. And in fact, I'll go ahead and go back and grab these really quick, because I want to show you what this looks like.
Well, and so that's the view that I'm used to, and so that's generally where I filter down there in the bottom right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd never seen the top one. I like it.
Yeah. So there are, again, different thought process, different approaches to this. I'm going to go ahead and grab these really quick just so I can show you. And we'll go ahead and filter those again, and we'll jump back to the develop module. But it's easy. I think it's a lot easier to go through the culling process in the grid view here, where we can look at the thumbnails and we can scroll through them. And if you've got a really big screen that you're working on, it's very easy to just pull them up large enough and just do the culling process there. You don't have to jump into that survey view. It saves time.
Luckily, I work with that 60-inch monitor.
That's, my word, it's incredible. Yeah. Really, you watch movies on it, but I won't tell anybody.
Work.
Yeah. No, but what we're going to do once we get to the develop module, I do want to be able to focus on the individual image that we're processing, but then I can see the upcoming images here, and that I'll show you why that matters here in just a second. Right. So the assumption that we're making here is that we're taking the time to photograph the images well up front, at least the majority of the time. And then
that's step one in photography.
Caveat. Yeah, we hope. We hope. And then that preset that we applied is doing even more work for us. And it's actually doing work that includes adjustments to these panels that we see down here on the bottom, the tone curve, hue and saturation, luminance, split toning, detail, etc. The preset houses those settings in it already. Okay. So the cool thing about that now is that I get to focus, and we're focusing on simplicity here. I get to focus on the basic adjustments panel. Sure. That means less moving around. But then the other cool thing about that is in the basic adjustments panel, I can actually cycle through those settings using the period or comma key.
Oh, okay.
So the period key is taking me down through the various settings, or comma key back up. And then once I get to that setting that I want to adjust, I can increase or decrease that setting with a plus or minus key. Oh. Or in greater increments, I can hold down the shift key and go plus or minus that way.
Ooh, it's all about the shortcuts.
It is. It's about the shortcuts. And again, simplicity. So we're only focusing on this one adjustments panel as opposed to worrying about all these other settings in the other panel. The preset already did that work. We're focusing on the basic adjustments panel, and that's where we're going to work from. So I can make an adjustment here, and I will add this little caveat in, and the recommendation that I make to you guys as photographers is to create the expectation for your clients that these images that you're processing are proofs. They're proof images. And I worked with ranges of clients, anywhere from $600-800 weddings up to $10,000 or more per wedding. And even working at that mid to high end level, as long as we created the appropriate expectation up front for these clients that these are proof images that we're going to be posting to their gallery, they understand that later on, if they're ordering images for an album, they're ordering images for large print, 20 by 30, 30 by 40, etc. We're going to do additional retouching at that point. What we're focusing on here is just basic processing. Okay. And that saves us time at this stage of the game. So, for example, you all might notice, some of you that are watching might notice there's a leaf there next to his foot. I'm not worried about retouching that at this stage. I'm going to do that later on when they order a large print.
Hashtag live authentically. You just keep the leaf.
This is true. Yeah. This is true. So Lightroom does have retouching capabilities, but in this case, we're focusing on just the basic adjustments. Sure. And that's what we're going to do at this point. So we'll jump to that next image. And we're going to make a slight adjustment here to the exposure. Just bring that up slightly. We can double check and make sure that we're not losing highlight detail by clicking on the J key. Okay. And that J key will show highlight clippings. Okay. If we zoom in here, you can see the red on her shirt. That indicates that there are highlight clippings, highlight detail that's been lost. Okay. And of course, we can bring that back in, just dropping that highlight slider a little bit.
I like her outfit. That's a side note.
Kind of classic, yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah, this couple was really great.
Well done, Smith.
They were totally into each other. Yeah. So let's jump to this next image here. Now, again, you can see the highlight clippings that were lost there in her shirt. So we can slide down. Again, keyboard shortcuts we want to focus on. The period key drops us down to the slider. Shift and minus drops the highlight settings just a little bit. Bring that detail back in. And really, we don't have to do a whole lot more here. And again, the key is to take the time photographing it up front so that we're exposing the image, the correct white balance, etc. And then minimal adjustments on the back end. You can jump to that next image, and we can increase the exposure just slightly. You'll notice when you have lost shadow detail, it signifies that with the blue. So we can bring up shadow detail here using that slider. And we can also do that in the blacks. We'll bring up the blacks a little bit and bring some of that detail back in.
And for those of you guys watching live, this will also be available to rewatch, same spot here on showit.com or on the YouTube as well. So if you don't have to be feverishly taking notes on these, you can always go back. So
for
just
sure.
Side note.
So those are just basic adjustments that can be made. Now, I mentioned about 85 to 90% of the workflow is based around keyboard shortcuts. There are going to be the exceptions to that. A couple of those I'll show you. What we'll use for this image in particular, if we ever have to straighten or crop, we're going to click on the letter R, so still a keyboard shortcut.
Okay.
But at this point, we are going to use our trackpad, and we're just going to kind of drag and drop where we need to crop or want to crop. In this case, I might want to focus more on their faces, so I'm just going to drag up this direction just a little bit, and we'll bring it this way, and then I just hit enter. If I need to straighten it all, I'm going to drag from the corner here, and I can make a quick adjustment. But this is one of the few times where I would actually have to use my my mouse or trackpad. Just click enter, and we move on. And the other time that you might use your trackpad or mouse, if you're on a mouse, let's say, for example, and let's hope this never happens, but let's say we've got a really crazy color situation going on, and you're like, I don't even know where to start with this right now. Hopefully you're shooting.
I've seen some corrupt cards that
do that sometimes. Well, and hopefully you're shooting in RAW. If you're shooting a JPEG at this point, either you're deleting that image or you're maybe converting it to black and white, if that does the trick, right? But if you need a good starting point, I'm going to click on the letter W, and it activates this little dropper.
Okay.
And I can bring this over to a neutral area in the image and just click on it once, and that gives me a great starting point.
Okay.
So in that case, I am using my trackpad or my mouse, but that gives me a good starting point, and then I can make slight adjustments to that, and we'll be ready.
So what is that feature called? You said W. I didn't.
Yeah, W.
So I like that it pops up with.
Yeah. So and of course you can always click on or manually click on it here, but it's just a white balance selector there that you're going to then. And the cool thing too is as you're dragging that little dropper around the image, if you've got the navigator pulled up over here on the left-hand side, you can get a preview of what it's going to do based on where you're dragging that dropper.
Cool. And
you can just click on it. So what we're going to do at this point, I'm going to go ahead and slide up here, just make a few adjustments to the, let's bring it down just a little bit more, to the white balance, exposure just a tiny bit, that image is basically ready to go. Yeah. So at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take advantage of the copy and paste or the synchronization tools. And that's why I wanted to pull up this film strip, and why it's important to be able to see this film strip. We're going to multi-select these images. I'm going to hold down Shift and move over it with the arrow key. So now we've selected multiple images. Right. That first image is the reference image. And then Command Shift S, or if you're on a Windows computer, Control Shift S, brings up the Synchronize Settings dialog box, and you can choose what settings you want to synchronize across those images. Okay. And then I just hit enter, and very quickly
all the settings,
exactly,
sync them all,
and you know, within a split second, applied those settings to the rest of the images, and it saves you an incredible amount of time that way.
Yeah, and once again, yeah, if you're shooting consistently, you're getting it right in camera. These presets, these types of adjustments are magical. Absolutely magical. Makes
a huge difference for sure. Yeah. So first step was the import with that develop preset that you were just talking about. Second step is to cull and convert to black and white, kind of a two-part second step. And then the processing itself. And it's important, again, to make sure what I'm teaching you guys today is not, again, not earth-shattering concepts. It's about the system. It's about the workflow. That's what's saving you time, is following these steps very specifically and keeping them separate. The fourth step, the last one, and very quickly we'll do this. I'm going to jump back to the library view.
Oh, real quick, what's the difference between blacks and shadows? It's a good question that came up. Madison, thank you for your question.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great question. Very simply, in this case, you're talking about the difference between the depth of those blacks. So, for example, if we go to, let's go back actually to the you're talking about a range of we'll just call it the blacks themselves. So if we make an adjustment.
Also, added feature to using all the keyboard shortcuts, clicks on a keyboard are louder than clicks on a mouse. So it makes it sound like you're busier. So if you're like in a coffee shop, you'd be like, oh man, he's really busy. Just that's
in case you need to make that impression.
That's a ninja tip right there. Yeah.
Yes, you do have a lot of ninja tips for sure. All right, so what we're going to do is slide down here. So if you'll notice, if we increase blacks here, it's kind of you can see the difference here. It almost creates this flat look across the image. Let's jump back up here to the shadows. The shadows are a little bit more specific to that particular area. And that's what seems to be the difference there between the two. So you're going to have to kind of play with that, and depending on the image and the settings involved there, you may have to play with that a little bit, but you can see the difference if you just compare them there. All right, cool.
Awesome. And I know that Karen's in there saying she gets frustrated maybe using Lightroom versus Photoshop. Depends on the last time you actually used Lightroom, because I remember there used to be so many things that you could only do in Photoshop that you couldn't do in Lightroom. I mean, specifically back, I remember using Lightroom 2 and 3, and you know, there were very limited options. But nowadays, how often do you use Photoshop when editing?
That's a great question. So Lightroom is specifically designed for efficient processing of generally large numbers of images, right? And that is specifically how it is designed. Photoshop is the exception to the rule when it comes to this type of post-production. And I'm going to occasionally, I mean, I would say, and what I would suggest to you all is maybe 5% to 10% of the time at the most that you would actually open that image. Very quick keyboard shortcut, Command E will open that image in Photoshop, and you take it into Photoshop. You do that more detailed retouching that is, frankly, a little bit easier to do in Photoshop versus Lightroom.
Especially the major things, head swaps.
Oh, for sure. Like yeah, I mean, that's not even an option in Lightroom for sure. So, but at that point, great, you can save it, and it actually saves back into that Lightroom catalog. So you still have easy access and reference there in the Lightroom catalog. But yeah, I would say maybe 5 to 10%. And again, that's the expectation that you create for the clients, right? A lot of times as photographers, it's easy to think that these little details matter. And we create that, there's some self-importance actually that's created in that, right?
That leaf.
Well, yeah, and granted, that leaf was pretty obvious, but there are many cases where a photographer, or not a photographer, but a client isn't going to notice the difference. We're making something bigger of that issue than it really is. So again, create the appropriate expectations for your clients. If you want to go above and beyond, great. Make sure they're at least paying you for that additional time. Otherwise, keep it simple. Create the expectation that what you're giving them is proofs. They can still look beautiful, but those details that are going to take an additional, let's say 15 minutes per image or whatever the case may be, they're going to be paying you extra for that because they're ordering an album or they're ordering a large print. And at that point, you're taking a little bit of additional time to take the image into Photoshop and to retouch it.
Awesome.
So the export process, we'll just do this very quickly for you guys as a reference point. And it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to select all the images, Command-Shift-E. And that is the keyboard shortcut to bring up the export dialog box.
So Command E opens it in Photoshop. Command Shift E does the export.
That is correct. You got it. So at this point, what we're going to do, we'll go ahead and we're going to choose, because remember we had that folder structure earlier. We're going to go to the Smith Portrait folder, and we're going to, at this point, we're choosing to put it in that folder. We're going to create this called Edited. That's the folder that we're going to export these images into. File naming, this is kind of fun. For those of you who have to manually reorder images in an order that you're processing, maybe because you're working with a second photographer or otherwise, you can click on this option here to rename. And at this point, we can create a file name preset. So I can come in here and edit this. And what I've done personally, and we used to have to do this for one of the galleries that we uploaded to, but create a sequence number in front of the file name. So you've got all these different options. I'm going to put a 3-digit sequence number first, and then underscore, and then insert the file name. So the cool thing is, if you did have to manually reorder those images, when you export, it keeps them in the order that you created, and you still have the original file name. So you can always go back to that raw file if you need to. Click done, and you can actually save that file naming sequence as a preset. But I can choose that. So that option does exist if you are manually reordering images. And then in the file settings, we're going to export these as JPEG and sRGB. That's pretty standard, but 80 quality instead of 100. I recommend exporting at 80 because you are going to save an extreme amount of time later on in the upload process. If you have to upload images to a gallery, that 20-point difference could save you as much as 1/3 of the time in the upload process. So exporting it, and the client's not going to notice the difference. You're not going to notice the difference unless you got a magnifying glass out trying to analyze the image.
Which is how I work.
Is it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan.
Okay. I could see that. You wear the hat too?
As often as possible.
Okay.
Not in public. Carrie has a thing about that.
But you're going to export these images that are still at high enough quality, certainly for an online gallery, but even large enough for you know, 20 by 30, 30 by 40, no problem. But it'll save you a good bit of time in the upload process. We're exporting at 80. And then image sizing, 240 ppi is standard, so we can leave that setting there. I actually have sharpening built into the Lightroom preset that I created.
Okay.
So that job's already done too. So I don't have to worry about extra sharpening on output. At this point, metadata we're going to leave alone just for the sake of simplicity in the workflow today. But that's it. I'm going to export those settings. And what's going to happen at this point is we'll export those images into this folder called edited. So here we have that 3-folder organizational system that we talked about earlier.
Originals, edited, and
the catalog file. The catalog folder that has the catalog file inside it. And that's it. Those are the 4 steps. Really, really simple. Import with the develop preset, the color preset. Cull and
black and white.
And convert to black and white. And then the actual processing itself. And then the export to JPEG like we just showed.
Awesome. Yeah, really 4.5 steps because we did file management at 0.5.
We did. That was the bonus material,
bonus,
right?
Hashtag number 3 will blow your mind. One of those things. No, well, thank you so much. I think that was great, and yeah, some good questions in there. And definitely, guys, this is a rewatch one with the shortcuts and some of the different things. But
for sure. Are there any questions that we can answer? I know that there are a lot coming through.
Yeah, I saw people talking Mac or PC. That's really not a question. There's an easy answer. I'm just kidding. I love both. Yeah, no, just a lot of really good.
Another question about photo mechanic.
Oh, Photo Mechanic. Yeah. I know that a lot of people, we've never used Photo Mechanic, but I know that a lot of other photographers that I love and adore have really put that into their workflow for really quick culling. Yeah. And becomes a big thing if you are into the additive culling or anti-culling, you know, putting the ones in there that you love. It can be really quick.
Well, that's the primary advantage to Photo Mechanic. And if there was one major drawback to Lightroom, it's the amount of time that it takes to build the thumbnail previews in the software. And that's why it takes so long. So if you have time to import those images into Lightroom and go grab a cup of coffee or go have lunch or do something like that, walk away from the computer for a little bit, I recommend sticking to one piece of software just for the sake of simplicity. Again, we're talking about we're talking about creating a simple workflow. What you want to do ultimately is to minimize the moving parts, right? And so if we can remove an additional piece of software from the workflow, then we're better off. And I like the idea that I'm keeping all of my workflow in Lightroom because I can literally see every single step of that process in that catalog.
Okay.
But yes, Photo Mechanic, and I wish Adobe would just buy up Photo Mechanic and put their technology into Lightroom. Photo Mechanic is a lot quicker when it comes to loading those raw files. And some photographers do. They cull there and then they bring the rest into Lightroom.
Yeah, you can cull and flag and do some fun stuff in there. So definitely take a look at it if you need that process to be a little quicker. I've heard a lot of great things. I've never used it because import and then walk away, feed the kids, pet the dog.
And that's great, right? Because as business owners, we're doing multiple things anyway. So it wouldn't be a big deal to just hit import and then minimize that and go to something else.
For sure.
And then that way you can literally see every single step of that workflow for all of those images in that catalog. It's not separated between 2 pieces of software.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much
for
being a part of it. You're also in town for something else, which is really exciting. I forgot to mention earlier on in the show, Thursday is the Showit Christmas party.
Very exciting.
So if you are out there, you're Showit. We created an event in the group. I know it's a little short notice, but the perfectly plaid Christmas.
Hey, I flew all the way up from Tennessee for it. I think people can make the effort. Yeah.
Now we got people coming from California, Tennessee, some other states. Arizona is pretty well represented.
Cool.
But that's because that's where we are. But you know,
yeah, we'd love to see everybody for sure.
Yeah. So definitely, if you're in the group, check that out. If you can make it out, we would love to have you. It's going to be here at the mothership, which is always a really exciting time because people don't know it's an actual spaceship. So
this is true. We are actually getting ready to go fly somewhere in just a little bit, right?
Fly away, always.
Okay.
Always. Well, thank you so much. And guys out there, thank you very much for joining us, for being a part of this great show and the great questions that you came up with. Next Tuesday, we have 2 of my favorite people. If you combine them into one person, they'd be like my spirit animal.
Wow.
We have the Scobies on, Ashley and Graham Scobie from the Atlanta, Georgia area, are going to be on with us next week, and it's going to be an amazing show. So can't wait to see you guys here next week. Have a great day, guys.